What's the most satisfying way you've ever seen someone expose a cheater? I found the hotel receipt on a Tuesday, tucked into the pocket of my husband's jacket when I went to drop it off at the dry cleaner. A hotel 10 minutes from our house. Dated for a night he told me he was working late on a client presentation. I waited until he fell asleep that night and checked his phone, and I found everything. Hundreds of texts, photos I'll never be able to unsee, and words you don't say to someone unless you mean them. The other woman was my best friend since college, maid of honor at my wedding. She held my hand in the delivery room when our daughter was born. They had been doing this for 3 years, which meant every dinner party and birthday and holiday where she hugged me and told me she loved me was a performance. My first instinct was to scream, to throw his phone at the wall and drag them both through every group chat we shared. But that felt too easy. They had years of lies, and I wanted them to feel every single one unravel in public. So I sent out invitations to an elaborate murder mystery dinner party, and I wrote the script myself. The night of the party, I greeted everyone at the door in a black velvet dress and handed out character cards as they arrived. My husband kept telling me how impressed he was that I put this all together, and my best friend gave me a long hug and said I was the most creative person she knew. I poured them both wine and told everyone to gather in the dining room because the game was about to begin. The scenario was simple. A wife had been murdered, and one of the 8 guests was the killer. I handed out the first envelope and watched my husband read it out loud. A hotel keycard and a room number. I saw him recognize it just for a second before he forced a laugh and said it was a nice, authentic touch. My best friend smiled but didn't laugh. The second envelope held printed text messages with the names barely changed. Things like, I can't stop thinking about last Tuesday, and she has no idea, and I wish we could just be together for real. My best friend made a joke about how realistic the props looked, but her voice came out wrong and one of the other wives glanced at her with a curious expression. My husband was no longer laughing. The third envelope contained a photograph, slightly blurred but clear enough to make out 2 people in the front seat of a car. His car. Her profile. One of the other guests squinted at it and said, wait, that actually looks like your car. And my husband stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his wine glass. He grabbed my arm in the kitchen and his voice was shaking when he asked what I was doing. I told him the game wasn't over yet and I had worked so hard on the final reveal and it would be rude to stop now. He looked like he might be sick. My best friend had moved toward the front door and I called out to her that she couldn't leave before the big ending because she was one of the main characters. She froze. Everyone was watching now, and I could see the other guests starting to realize that something was very wrong. I held up the last envelope and told them this was the moment we had all been waiting for. I pulled out the unedited screenshots with both of their names fully visible, the hotel selfie where they were looking at each other like I had already stopped existing, and the receipt with his credit card number printed at the bottom. I told them the killer was the devoted husband, and his accomplice was the loyal best friend who never once hesitated to betray her. I looked at both of them and said the victim wasn't actually dead, but she was done. The room went completely silent. One of the other wives whispered, "Oh my God," and covered her mouth. My husband kept saying I didn't understand the whole story, and my best friend was crying and saying she was sorry over and over. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out 2 suitcases I had packed that afternoon, one with his clothes and one with everything she had ever left at my house over the years. I set them by the front door and told them they had been playing roles for years, and I just thought everyone deserved to see how talented they really were. She tried to say my name, and I told her she didn't get to say my name anymore. He begged me to let him explain, and I opened the front door and told them the game was over and they could leave together now. They walked out without another word, dragging their suitcases to his car while everyone watched through the window. The other guests were still frozen in my living room holding their wine glasses and clue envelopes. I closed the door and turned around to face them. "So," I said, "anyone want to stay for dessert? I made tiramisu."